Picture this. You open your banking app on a random Tuesday, and the number staring back doesn't match what you actually put in. Something moved that wasn't you. Last cycle you deposited $800, same as every cycle before it, but the balance jumped by almost $2,000. The market did more for your future in 30 days than your paycheck did all month. Your money finally started outworking you. But here's the twist that should rattle you a little. For roughly the first 5 years, that same account felt like a dead weight. Slow, stubborn, like shoving a stalled car uphill with your bare hands. Nothing about the plan changed. Not the paycheck, not the fund, not the discipline. Only one thing shifted. A single threshold got crossed, a point where the math quietly changes teams and starts fighting for you instead of against you. I'm Jordan, and today on Novira Invests, I'm breaking down exactly where that threshold sits, why it everything, and what it becomes even if you never contribute another cent again. If that sounds useful, tap like. It actually helps this reach more people who need it. Now let's meet someone who lived the slow part. Call her Priya, 26 years old. She did the homework, opened a brokerage account, and committed to dropping $800 a month into a plain, unglamorous index fund. No day trading, no hype coins, no 3 a.m. options bets, just the unsexy grown-up version of investing everyone recommends. After 12 full months of doing everything by the book, guess what her balance showed? Around $9,900. She'd personally deposited $9,600 of it, which means the celebrated, supposedly life-changing force of compounding had handed her a grand total of $300. $300. That barely covers a weekend and a couple of takeout orders. Priya spent an entire year skipping nights out, nursing a car with a suspicious engine noise, and turning down a friend's beach trip, and the market's thank you note was smaller than a decent pair of headphones. This is the exact moment most people walk away, because nobody tells them this part going in. Every compounding graph you've ever seen shows that gorgeous curve sweeping up toward the sky. Nobody shows you the years you spend living inside the flat, boring bottom of that curve. In year one, roughly 96% of Priya's growth was just her own money staring back at her in a different account. She wasn't building wealth yet. She was shuffling cash between pockets, one of which was simply harder to reach. And her brain, like every human brain, looked at that tiny number and screamed, waste of time. We're built to think in straight lines. See $300 of growth in month 12, and some part of you assumes year 30 will just be that times 30. It won't, not even close. But your instincts don't know that yet, which is exactly why so many people quit right before the machine starts running. Let's be honest about what those early years actually feel like, because the charts never show this. It feels like scrolling past a friend's vacation photos while you push another payment into a number that barely moves. It feels like checking your account after the market's best month in years and realizing the gain wouldn't cover your rent. It feels like trying to explain to relatives at dinner that yes, you technically have savings, and no, you're not touching them, and watching their faces say that sounds miserable. Year 2, Priya's sitting around $20,000. Year 3, close to $32,000. Year 4, roughly $44,000. Real progress, sure, but almost every dollar of it is still hers, just reflected back at her. Now meet her friend Owen. Same starting age, similar income, started investing the exact same month. By year 3, Owen looks at his $32,000, runs the math on how long this will actually take, and decides it isn't worth it. He cashes out, puts a chunk down on a shiny used truck, and blows the rest on a bathroom remodel in an apartment he rents. And here's the brutal part. In the moment, Owen looks like the winner. Nicer wheels. Nicer tile. Priya has a spreadsheet and a Wednesday night grocery run. For close to a decade, every visible signal says Owen made the smarter call. But the scoreboard that actually decides the game is invisible, and it doesn't update on your timeline. That $32,000 he pulled out, left alone at a typical market return, was on pace to become well over $1 million by retirement. He didn't buy a truck and a bathroom. He bought the most expensive tile job of his life. He just won't see the bill for another 35 years. There's a reason a famous investing partner once told an audience, plainly, that the first $100,000 is brutal, and that you find a way to get there no matter what it costs you in comfort, because after that, the pressure eases up. Coming from a billionaire, that advice sounds almost funny. A guy worth tens of billions telling regular people to pinch every penny? But he wasn't exaggerating for effect. He was pointing at a real mathematical line. He just never drew the actual math behind it. So let's draw it. Once you actually see this mechanism, you can't unsee it, and every dollar decision after this gets easier. Here's the core idea the entire video hangs on. At any moment, your net worth is being pushed forward by two separate engines. Engine 1 is you. Your income, your habit of showing up, the cash you physically move into the account. Engine 2 is the market itself, the return your existing pile generates completely on its own, with zero extra effort from you. Early on, Engine 1 is doing almost all the lifting. But Engine 2 has a strange quality. It gets more powerful every single year, automatically, without you touching anything, because it's a percentage of a pile that keeps getting bigger. And there's a specific calculable point where Engine 2 overtakes Engine 1, where the market starts adding more to your net worth annually than your own paycheck does. Want the formula? Take your yearly contribution and divide it by your expected annual return. Contribute $800 a month, that's $9,600 a year, and divide by a 7% return, and you land around $137,000. Below that line, you're the engine. Above it, you're riding shotgun. Push the expected return to 10%, and that crossover point drops to roughly $96,000. So the first $100,000 isn't just a nice round number for a thumbnail, it's the on-ramp into the exact zone where your money starts out-earning your labor. Sit with that for a second. This is a future version of your account that works harder than you do, never takes a sick day, and has never once dreaded a Monday. Now watch what this does to your timeline, because this is where the math stops being nice and starts being almost unfair in your favor. Sticking with Priya, $800 a month, 7% average return. Her first $100,000 takes about 8.5 years. Painful stretch. But the second $100,000? Roughly 5.5 years. The third, about 4 years. The fourth, closer to 3. And the one that breaks people's brains, the final $100,000, the stretch that carries her from $900,000 to a full $1 million, takes under a year and a half. Same person. Same monthly habit. The first $100K took nearly 9 years. The last one took 16 months. She didn't get a raise. She didn't get smarter. The math simply started moving more than 5 times faster for the identical monthly deposit. Bump the return to 10%, close to the long-run average of the broader stock market, and the whole ladder compresses even harder. First $100K in around 6 years. The jump from $900,000 to $1 million happens in roughly 12 months flat. At that point, your portfolio alone is generating 6 figures a year, out-earning the median household income in this country, without lifting a finger. But here's my favorite part of this entire breakdown. Everything above assumes you keep contributing forever. Now watch what happens if you stop completely. Say you grind your way to $100,000 by 30 and then never add another dollar again. You spend the rest of your life buying whatever coffee you want, guilt-free. At 7%, that untouched $100K turns into roughly $1 million by 65. At 10%, it becomes close to $2.6 million. From $100,000 and 35 years of doing absolutely nothing else. That's the rule of 72 doing its quiet work. Divide 72 by your return and you get your doubling time. At 10%, your money doubles roughly every 7 years. 100 becomes 200, becomes 400, becomes 800, becomes 1.6 million. It isn't magic. It's just doubling, stacked on doubling again, which also makes waiting incredibly expensive. Hit that 100K at 25 instead of 35, and at a 10% return, the gap by age 65 is over 4 million versus a little under 2 million. Same milestone, same effort. 10 years of timing difference, and the math hands one person an extra $2+ million. Nobody worked harder for that gap. The calendar did it. Time is the one ingredient in this whole recipe you can never buy more of, borrow, or fake, which is exactly why starting earlier than feels comfortable is quietly one of the smartest financial moves available to almost anyone. Quick aside, I also run a free space where I walk creators through building channels like this one, from scratch, step by step, no fluff. If growing an audience interests you, it's linked below. All right, back to the math. Before you sprint to a calculator and start mentally furnishing your retirement house, let's have an honest conversation, because there are a few things that hockey stick charts conveniently leave out. And I'm not going to be one of the channels that hides them. First, who actually reaches this milestone? According to Federal Reserve survey data, only around 1 in 4 American households holds $100,000 or more in retirement savings. Nearly half report having essentially nothing set aside. The median retirement account balance sits far below the average balance, and that gap tells you everything. A small cluster of large accounts is dragging the average upward, while most people aren't anywhere close to the crossover point. That's not laziness. The national personal savings rate today hovers in the low single digits, a fraction of what it was decades ago. On a typical household income, saving at that modest rate stretches the road to your first $100,000 out to nearly 2 decades. The system isn't exactly clearing a path for you. So, if you're behind, you're not failing. You're playing a harder difficulty setting, and the underlying math still works exactly the same, it just asks more of you up front. Second, that 10% average return is real, but it's a little misleading. The broader market has averaged close to 10% annually across roughly a century. But in any given individual year, the return rarely lands anywhere near that number. Some years post huge gains north of 20%. Other years post brutal losses past 30%. Roughly 1 year in 4 finishes negative. There was an entire decade where the market essentially went nowhere. So when someone quotes you 7 or 10%, understand that's the long-run cruising speed, not a guarantee for your specific next 5 years. You will live through stretches where your balance drops and the crossover feels like it's sprinting away from you. That's not the math malfunctioning. That's simply the toll on the road. The people who actually reach the other side are, almost without exception, the ones who stayed in the car. Third, the inflation question, because someone's already typing it in the comments. That famous first 100,000 advice was given decades ago. Adjusted for today's prices, that same firepower would sit closer to $200,000 now. So is the modern target really double? Fair argument. But the crossover isn't really about a fixed number. It's about the moment your portfolio's annual return overtakes your annual contribution. For most realistic savers, that flip happens somewhere in the low to mid 6 figures, regardless of exactly which number you pin it to. The principle hasn't aged. Only the price tag has. Here's a twist almost nobody mentions. Some people hit their number and then stall out completely, camping at the base of the mountain right when the climb was about to get easier. It's almost never a market problem. It's a lifestyle problem. Crossing 6 figures can feel like permission. Permission to lease the nicer car. Permission to upgrade to the apartment with the rooftop pool you'll visit twice. Permission to quietly stop contributing because, hey, you made it. Every one of those choices yanks fuel straight out of engine 2, right as it's finally starting to roar. There's a version of that same advice worth repeating here. Never interrupt compounding without a genuinely good reason. Every dollar pulled from a $100,000 account at 30 isn't just a dollar. At a 10% return, it's roughly $28 stolen from your 65-year-old self. That $10,000 upgrade isn't $10,000. It's nearly $300,000 future dollars wearing a disguise. I'm not saying never spend a cent. I'm saying know the real price tag before you swipe. So what actually speeds up your crossover? Here's where most personal finance content quietly misleads people. Before you hit 6 figures, your rate of return barely matters at all. I know that sounds backwards, but run the numbers. If you've got $20,000 invested and you burn 40 hours chasing an extra % of return, congratulations, you've earned roughly $200. Spend those same 40 hours finding an extra $200 a month to invest instead, and that's over $2,000 a year, 12 times the impact. Below the crossover, your savings rate is basically the entire game. Fund selection is a rounding error by comparison. So automate the contribution the day your paycheck lands before your brain gets a vote. Pick a boring, low-cost, broad index fund and keep an eye on fees. A 1% advisory fee sounds tiny until you realize it can quietly eat a quarter of your lifetime returns. Then, and this is the genuinely hard part, stop checking daily. Check quarterly. The flat years aren't a glitch. They're the entry fee, and most people simply refuse to pay it. Let me close with the stat that still gets me every time. One of the wealthiest investors alive is worth well over $100 billion today. Guess how much of that fortune he had by the time he turned 65? Roughly 3%. 97% of one of history's largest fortunes arrived after the age. Most people are already retired. And he isn't even the top-performing investor by annual return. Plenty of fund managers have beaten his percentage by a wide margin. His real advantage was starting as a kid and simply never stopping, finding his first 100,000 early and letting the doubling run for 8 decades straight. As he's put it himself, wealth is like a snowball rolling downhill. What matters isn't the push, it's finding wet snow and a long enough hill. You don't need his stock-picking instincts. You need his hill, and the hill is just time. So here's the whole video compressed into 3 lines. The first $100,000 is slow, unglamorous, and powered almost entirely by your own sacrifice, which is exactly why most people never finish it. But buried inside that grind is a crossover point where the market quietly takes the wheel. Every 100K after that arrives faster than the last, and a single untouched $100,000 at 30 can become a 7-figure retirement completely on its own. The math was never broken during the slow years. It was simply loading. Your only real job is to still be standing there when it finishes. Before you go, if this made you think building a channel like Novira Invests is a legitimate path, you're right, it is. I run a free community where I walk through exactly how channels like this one get built and grown, monetization included, step by step. Links in the description, and I'd genuinely love to see you there. If this video helped, hit like and let me know in the comments, what number are you personally chasing? One quick note before you close the tab. I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This video is for general education only, and every result depends entirely on your own choices, timeline, and risk tolerance.